So he's going to come and challenge you guys in a different way, and I'm excited for him to do that. Anything else you want me to say about you, Rich?
No.
All right. Then you're in charge.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sizing you guys up here real quick. You know why I'm sizing you up? We'll figure out in a second. Okay. Thank you for inviting me here. Mr. Nathan and I, is it Nathan? Mr. Nathan, what's the protocol here?
Sir.
Master and Commander Nathan. We met at a coffee shop a couple weeks ago. We got to talking. He's like, hey man, why don't you come and talk to my students? And I thought that'd be technical glitches. Pause. Okay. Well, all right, I'll just plow forward here. You invited me to speak to you guys, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm happy to be able to address you, but also because this is going to be a little different. I don't really have a sermon planned. In the end, is it because I'm moving or something?
Maybe.
All right, I'll try to be stationary. All right, so let's take this from, oh boy, still. Let me just take this off. My voice is pretty loud. Let's do this. This is awkward.
What it is every Sunday.
Oh, really? All right.
You can use that if you want.
Okay. All right, man. Third time's the charm. So anyway, I don't have a real sermon planned. I do have some remarks at the end that I'm going to get to. But this is going to be a dialogue. We're going to be talking back and forth. But here's the exciting part. I don't know, you might be freaked out by this, but I'm not going to address you as a Christian. I'm going to address you as an atheist. Everybody's like, Now, I am a Christian, okay, so breathe easy. I'm on your team. We believe all the same things, or at least most of the same things. But in a minute, I'm going to put on what I call my atheist glasses. And when I put these glasses on, I transform from Rich Bordner Christian to Rich Bordner atheist philosophy professor. And when I transform, we're going to start talking to each other. You guys are going to ask me questions. If you want to ask an atheist a question, I can't promise to answer as all atheists would, because atheism is a pretty big tent. But I will answer as some might. And if you want to pose a challenge, that's fine too. We'll just see where this goes. And at the end, I'll come out of character and we'll draw some lessons from it. And hopefully this will be a good interactive time. Okay? And we'll see we'll see how prepared you guys are, because some of you, who are the seniors here? Okay, we got a few seniors. Eventually, all you guys are going to graduate from, at least, I don't know, hopefully graduate from high school. I always tell my students around March, April, hey, don't buy those graduation invitations yet. You haven't gotten your grades. But anyway, you guys are going to graduate high school eventually. You're going to go into college. Some of you are going to go on to the work world. And you're going to meet guys like my character. And maybe you'll be challenged. And will you be ready at those times? We're about to find out. Okay, so start thinking of your questions. I'm going to make one or two introductory remarks, and then we'll just dive right in. But start thinking of your questions, okay? I was thinking about just coming in as an atheist and not letting you know I'm as a Christian, but eventually we thought, like, nah, let's kind of go easy on them. But that's what we're going to do today, all right? Can you hear me? All right, that's much better. Okay, here we go. You guys ready? Mm-hmm. Good morning. Good morning. I am excited to address you guys today, to talk to you. I'm a little apprehensive because I don't get invited to very many religious groups. I don't get invited to speak to churches, much less high school religious groups. Usually when I speak to groups, there's a group of professors, maybe business leaders, more secular environments. I almost never get invited to guys like you. And I was kind of thinking about why that is. And I came up with with a couple of reasons. I think there's some fear. That's maybe why a lot of atheists don't get invited to very many churches. Maybe you guys are looking at the atheist kind of with a little side eye, like, what's this guy going to do? Boom, like I'm a boogeyman or something. But just relax. Just look, I'm a lot like you. Right? I'm a husband. I'm a father. I love being a dad. I got morality. Surprise. I'm not going to boost your iPhone. Okay? I don't go home and draw a pentagram on the floor and sacrifice a chicken. That's not what atheists do. So just breathe and relax. I'm a normal guy. Okay? Don't think that I'm some weird, mysterious character. Secondly, I think the main reason why is because we just occupy two different worlds thought-wise. You guys are people of faith, and I'm not. I'm a man of evidence. I'm a man of science. I'm a man of logic. You have to, if you want me to follow what you guys are preaching, you have to give me that sort of thing. But you guys, your whole belief system is built on faith. And faith, by definition, is belief without the evidence. That's what your own book says about faith. It talks about faith all over the place. Jesus castigated Thomas. It's Thomas, not John. It's in the book of John. So Jesus castigated Thomas for asking for evidence. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul says that we walk by faith, not by sight. There you go. Faith, evidence, two totally different things. It's like oil and water. The book of Hebrews, whoever wrote that book, it wasn't Paul, probably, says that, what is it? You guys know the verse, right? Faith is the evidence of things unseen, the assurance of, it's faith is the evidence of things hoped for. There you go. Things of hope for, the assurance of things not seen. So faith is this dogged assurance, this certainty in things you can't even see. So there it is again. Your whole belief system is based upon faith, things that you can't see, things that you don't have evidence for. And as an atheist, I'm just totally the opposite. Maybe that's why we don't get invited to speak to churches very much. So I don't know, but I'm glad to be here. What I want this time to be a dialogue where you guys are asking me questions, you're posing challenges even. You guys are an evangelistic group, so I know you go around talking to people about Jesus and trying to get people to believe what you believe and those sorts of things. Look, if you want to do that, if you want to try to persuade me, that's fine. I'm all ears. Let's see where this goes. I don't know if you'll be able to, because what I just said, I'm not really, I don't really pay much attention to faith. You're going to have to give me some evidence, and I don't know if you can, but let's see. Okay? You guys ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right. So just raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and let's see where this dialogue goes, okay? Who wants to be the first brave person to take a stab at it? Go ahead.
Well, okay. You said that we have faith and that you go based on science, but in reality, you just have faith on something different. Like you have faith in it's something else you can't see. You have faith in two molecules that collided to create the universe. Okay.
I think you're a little confused about what science is. So science is not this mysterious faith-ridden process. All right, it's pretty basic. Science is the study of the world. It's the study of the natural world. You observe something in the natural world. You have a hypothesis about it. You think it happened because of this sort of thing, so you form your hypothesis, and then you test your hypothesis. And then you gather evidence, you gather observation, and you either confirm the hypothesis or you disconfirm it, and you tweak the hypothesis, and then you redo it. So it's a process of testing your hypotheses with evidence and with what you're seeing out there in the real world, with logic. And it's nothing mysterious, and it's led to a lot of great discoveries. The only reason why we're able to talk is because of science. I got this microphone in front of me. I have a computer in front of me. I drove here in a car. The thing that's going to save us from the coronavirus is science, the vaccine. The reason why you guys aren't in danger of polio is because of science. It has a pattern of immense success. So I think you might be a little confused about what science is. It's not faith as much as it is justified confidence based upon how science has given us success in the past. Do you have a follow-up?
Well, science, okay, but like science just is like with knowledge, like the Latin, like the roots and stuff.
Mhm.
But you just have like going back to like I'm just thinking about like the beginning of the world, for example. Like I'm just thinking of like an example kind of thing. But like if you go back to the beginning of the world, just assuming that you believe the Big Bang Theory, that kind of thing, then you have the faith that two molecules collide. It's something that you weren't there. No one saw it, so you don't have that evidence. The hard like you're saying that you have a solid evidence.
So are you saying that you need to be there to see something in order to have evidence?
That's what you said.
That's not what I said. You're putting words in my mouth. You're doing what is called attacking a straw man. The straw man fallacy is a logical fallacy where you set up a weaker version of your opponent's view and then you attack that instead of the real thing. I never said that you need to be there to see something directly in order to have evidence for it. Okay, that's not what science is about, again. So don't attack a straw man, attack what I really believe. Yeah, I'll give you one more follow-up before I move on.
Oh, I was going to say, then what is the evidence?
For what?
For the Big Bang Theory.
Okay, glad you asked. First, here, let me get a show of hands. I will answer your question, okay? Don't worry. But who here believes in the Big Bang? 2 people? 3? That's it? I want to know who your science teachers are. They are dropping the ball. Look, you guys realize that you just put yourselves at odds with almost every respected cosmologist expert out there. There is overwhelming evidence for the Big Bang. Granted, we weren't there, but we don't need to be there in order to have evidence for it. Evidence for the Big Bang. This could be a talk in and of itself, but I'll just give you a couple of pieces. The redshift. As we observe the redshift gets greater as we go out and go out in the cosmos, and so that tells us that galaxies are flying away from us at greater and greater speeds. Secondly, the cosmic microwave background radiation, that is a remnant, a leftover from the Big Bang. Third, the speed of an explosion of a type 1a supernova. As we go back in cosmic time, we see the supernovas at greater distances from our vantage point are exploding more slowly. And so that speaks of an explosion at a certain point. I could give evidence for 20, 30 minutes on this, but that's just some of the evidence in the Big Bang. So that's my view of origins. Okay. All right, in the back, go ahead.
What says that science and God couldn't both be true? Like God couldn't have used science to try and create everything.
Well, I'm a little confused as to what you might mean by that, but let me take a stab at this. I don't think we need God in order to explain the origins of the universe. I think the Big Bang model is completely adequate for it. So if you add God to the equation, it's just irrelevant. It's not needed. It's like writing down instructions to boil water. You say, okay, you put water in a pot, you put the pot in the stove, you bring the temperature to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you add a leprechaun. The explanation of God is like that leprechaun. It's just not needed. We can completely account for our origins using naturalistic explanations. I just don't think you need it. Okay, go ahead.
I heard a good analogy once that said if you snatched a watch and you put it in a little plastic bag and you shook it up, you would never, ever get it to be the same way that watch once was. I only say that because, if the Big Bang Theory is the only thing, there's no reason for God, that would make life basically pointless and meaningless. There'd be no point to living. Why are we here in the first place? By believing in a God to the equation, because I wouldn't say that you disagree that there couldn't be a God, right? In the equation, we're saying God doesn't disprove the equation, I guess, right?
Okay, there's a lot to respond there. I'm not sure I understood your point, but let me just try to parse a few of those things apart, because I think part of your problem is you're bringing in a bunch of things and just putting in a word salad, and I'm not quite sure it's making sense here. So you talked about an analogy at first, and then you kind of pivoted to meaning and purpose and stuff like that. So let's deal with the analogy first. I don't get what that has to do with the Big Bang at all. What's the point of your analogy?
I guess
The watching
my
everything.
analogy was to be like, the chances are so like slim for something like this to happen.
Yes, but so what? Or even if not really, they're not the odds aren't as stark as you might make them out to me. But even if I agree with you, so what? What would that show?
I guess there's just like nothing deeper in humanity than we're just a clump of cells that just happen to be here for a little bit. If there's no like creator.
Okay, look, now you're pivoting from explanation of our origins, talking about the Big Bang, to meaning and purpose. So let me address that. Look, even though I'm an atheist and I don't believe that God created us, that doesn't mean that I'm without meaning. It doesn't mean that I'm without purpose. I have a family. I love my daughters. I want to better the human race. I want to leave humanity a little bit better than it was when I came on the scene. I want to advance human knowledge. These are all things that I seek to do as an atheist. And look, I'm actually a lot happier now as an atheist than I was when I was a Christian. Newsflash, I used to be you guys. Okay, I was raised a Christian. I went to an evangelical church when I was growing up. I wasn't a nominal believer either. I was a leader in my youth group. I was a leader in my Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter. Then when I went away to college, I found out that I've been living in a bubble, and I was open to this huge new world of discovery. And eventually, long story short, I walked away. But I'm so thankful I did, because I'm so much happier now, because I'm not shackled by dogma. I'm not shackled by a book that's thousands of years old that commands really odd things. No offense, but if you want to ask me a question about that, I can go into it. But I'm so much more happier now because I've been liberated from the shackles of religious faith, and I can follow the truth where it leads. I can look at the evidence and follow that rather than faith. So I do have meaning and purpose, even though I'm an atheist. So you had your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you consider the Big Bang to be a theory or a scientific law?
Even if it's a theory, that doesn't mean that it's just a guess. Okay, when people in science say, I have a theory, it's been confirmed with a lot of evidence over a long period of time. So theory is pretty solid. All right, and there's a lot of evidence behind it.
So basically, correct me when I'm wrong, but evolution basically started with something like 2 cells in a pond of muck, something, and then something happened where they were able to gain energy to begin evolving and reproducing and eventually forming modern.
I don't know a single evolutionist who would put it that way, who would say we started out in muck and then something happened and then boom, here we are. Let me, okay, I'm going to come back to this, but let me ask you guys another question here. Same thing I posed to the Big Bang. Who here does not believe in the modern neo-Darwinian synthesis?
What? Not?
Yeah, who does not believe in the neo-Darwinian synthesis? Who does not believe in evolution? Okay, now, that's the next question, actually. Keep your hand up. Keep your hand up if you can adequately define it. And be ready for me to call on you. So I go, so gotcha. He's like, oh. All right, go ahead.
All right, so the idea is Darwin's original theory was that he saw different organisms living in different environments with slightly different features. So his idea was that all organisms are influenced by their environment, and that the strongest organisms, the ones most suited to those environments, will survive and reproduce with other organisms that are suited to that environment, thus producing offspring that is even more so. And over time, with different environments and organisms being geologically separated, experiencing different environments, we eventually get to our current biological.
Okay, so that's a very popular understanding of evolution. I'm actually going to give you a definition in a moment. But here's the point. When I asked who rejected evolution, most of you raised your hands. But then when I asked you if you could define it, most of you guys put your hands down. So you're telling me that you're rejecting something that you can't even define. So if you said, hey, do you believe the Bible? And I said, no. And you said, well, have you read it? And I said, no, I don't need to. That'd be kind of unfair, right? Right? So like, why are you're rejecting something you don't even understand. And maybe one or two guys could define it. So here's the modern, what's called the neo-Darwinian synthesis. It has two, maybe three broad components. Number one, common ancestry. And we can trace our genetic ancestry back in that, that's Darwin's tree of life. And the driving mechanisms are, number one, natural selection that is acting upon random genetic mutations. And those genetic mutations are, like I said, random, and natural selection is a completely natural process. And so that generates the diversity of life that we see, and it's a completely natural explanation. So it's not quite what you guys were getting at. So, but my point is that you're rejecting something that you can't even define. Like, what business do you have doing that? Go ahead.
So, what do you suppose created the Big Bang itself? Like, how did the Big Bang start? You're starting with something to create the Big Bang.
Okay, so that is what is called a loaded question. So when you load it up with things that I don't hold to, you said, what created the Big Bang? I don't think the Big Bang was created. Okay, I think the Big Bang happened. That doesn't mean that something created it. Essentially, look, when we do quantum mechanics, when we look at the quantum level, we now know that things at the quantum level happen uncaused, out of nothing, all the time. So if you look at things like the Casimir effect and lamp shift, and you look at the radioactive decay of a uranium isotope, those things happen uncaused. Like we don't have any sort of prior causal explanation to show why an electron comes into existence at this point in time out of nothing in the quantum vacuum, goes out of existence at this point in time, and then pops back into existence over here. And it's not like it just disappeared, it just doesn't exist. There's an indeterminacy at the fundamental level of our existence. And scientists like Michio Kaku and Lawrence Krauss, Stephen Hawking is another guy, if you read his book, The Grand Design, he shows and he gives models how the Big Bang could have happened in the quantum vacuum and could have, come out of the quantum vacuum, which is nothing, uncaused. So we don't need, again, it goes back to adding a leprechaun. We don't need God to explain the Big Bang. It's completely adequate natural models. Go ahead.
So I was going to move away from origin and
Go ahead.
morality and ask a question more like kind of relating to now.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I'm assuming you've studied a little bit about atoms and atomic structure and all that kind of stuff, right?
A little bit. I mean, I'm a philosophy teacher now, but when I was in college, it started out as a biology major, so yeah.
Okay. So with atoms, you know that you've never actually seen an atom, but the way we know they exist, or at least theories of what they might look like, is their effect on, through research and testing and their effect on our everyday lives, right?
Partially, yeah.
Yeah. So with atoms, and I'm going to use this as an analogy, we can't see them, but we know they exist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing. We know they exist via their effect on our lives. Kind of the same thing with wind. We can't see the wind, but we know it affects our lives when we see it blowing through the trees. And I was going to use that as an analogy, as in we can't see God, and there's not going to be a whole lot of evidence that 100% supports that God actually exists that we can use facts on. But we know he exists via his effects on our lives today.
Which is?
His effects is in all of nature, how nature works, all of these processes, these very complex things, just even in our body at the microscopic level, all of those different types of things that are just extremely complex.
All right, that's where you're going. So let me stop you there. Number one, that's a nice sounding analogy, all right, but I think it breaks down in several places. Number one, notice that my point about not needing God to explain the universe and the diversity of life we see, that still stands. We can completely explain what we see with our naturalistic models without referencing the leprechaun of God. Okay, that's the first point. Second point, what you're doing here is you are trying to explain one mystery, namely the universe, by referencing a even bigger mystery, God. So if you think that complexity and information means that something is designed and that it begs for an intelligent designer, well then who designed God? Okay, because God is an even more complex thing or person. He's got information in his mind. So if complexity means design, well, that means God himself is designed. So you haven't really explained anything. You just kick the explanatory can down the road. It's like you're in a boat that's leaking. You got a hole over here, and you cut a hole over here in the boat. You take that out, and you put it to plug the hole. Well, you still got this hole over here. Okay? And then the third problem it gets you into is the problem of bad design. So God is supposed to be perfect. But the design that we see, supposed design we see in the world, is anything but perfect. Okay, why do we have vestigial organs like the appendix, just this little thing that doesn't do anything for us, but it explodes and it kills many people every year? Why do we have our breathing mechanism in the same place as our eating mechanism, so hundreds of thousands of people choke every year? Why would a perfect designer design something like that? So you're kind of like the frog that jumps from the frying pan into the fire. You know, you're not really solving yourself any problems. You want to reply?
So I was just going to say two things to that. First of all, I guess you could probably say with creationism and the belief in God, like you said at the beginning, most of it is based on belief, because you can't actually fully prove something anytime. It's mostly belief. And the second thing I was going to ask you is if you would say now most of our world has order to it, or has at least some amount of order.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would say it has order, and I mean, go a little bit back to the Big Bang. The Big Bang was, as you described it, it was microscopic, and it was the things that combined to create all of what we have now via the process of time. With enough time, all of that formed. So I was going to say, do you understand the theory of thermodynamics, the second law?
Second law of thermodynamics, yeah.
So in that law, it states that anything that starts in one way is eventually going to lose its order, is eventually going to get more chaotic and less order than it originally started. And so you've probably heard this argument before, but you could say that with starting in a random combination of things which started the universe, if that started with a certain amount of order, there would be logically a less amount of order now. So it begs the question of how did we get all of this order now if we probably started with a very minimal amount of
Okay,
order.
so the second law of thermodynamics states that closed systems tend to entropy over time. Now the problem is that our Earth is not a closed system. Okay, it's getting new infusions of energy from our sun and from outer space all the time. So that doesn't apply to our own Earth. Okay. Now we see spontaneous order in things all the time. So I don't know if you guys are privy to this, but there was a tsunami in Japan several years ago, 2011, right around, and people observed in the chaos of the tsunami and the after effects whirlpools. Well, what's a whirlpool? A whirlpool is a certain amount of complexity, a certain amount of order in the chaos. Okay, snowflakes. Those are also examples of complexity and order that happen completely naturalistically. So we get order amongst the chaos naturalistically all the time. It's just a matter of degree, not kind. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Let me go to somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Question. Do you fear death?
Do I fear death? Well, not really. I understand it's a fact of life. It's going to happen. And I just want to seize the day and live as best I can right now because I know that I only have one shot at life. So, not really.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Do we have any? We've only had one female. Or I think one. Am I missing? Is there another girl? Can we get another girl to ask a question? Go ahead.
I was just wondering, what do you believe happens after you die?
I think that's it. When you die, you get buried in the ground. I don't believe in any sort of soul. I think that you're just your body, and so when your body dies, that's pretty much the end of it. You have one more follow-up?
Yeah, and I know you said that you're talking about purpose. Your purpose in life is like to be a dad and like a mentor to your kids. But what is like, it's kind of going back to what his question was, like, what is the purpose of the human race? Like, why is it even here if like there's no afterlife or like things you're working towards? You know what I mean?
Okay. A couple of things real briefly here. I think broadly speaking, with our species, we have an instinct to preservation and survival. So the things that help us propagate our species and survive as a human race, those are things that get selected and things that we focus on. Now, in terms of myself, again, I don't need, you don't need to believe in God in order to have purpose. You don't need to believe in God in order to be happy. You don't need to believe in God to know right from wrong, to have morality. In fact, a lot of atheists beat the pants off a lot of Christians in that category. So I just don't think you need to believe in God in order to live a purposeful life. You know, I do completely without those things. Okay, how much more time do we have, Mr. Nathan?
Till noon o'clock.
Till noon o'clock. All right, well, I better come out of character here. I know you guys have a lot of questions, but the atheist is gone. So everybody breathe. It's getting kind of tense. Let me turn on my computer again here real quick. So, all right. So kind of shake it up, breathe. You guys did participate a lot. Thank you. I wish we had a lot more time to dialogue, but I don't. So I'm going to come out of character, and we're going to bring some lessons home here, just to comfort you a little bit, to encourage you. Look, I don't believe in almost everything I said in character. Reminder, I'm a Christian. I'm on your team, and there's one reason to be a Christian. Not because it makes you feel good, not because it helps you live life happy or anything like that. I'm a Christian. You should be a Christian because it's true. All right? And that's not a faith statement. That's not a faith statement. I'm not saying that just because I feel strongly in it. Christianity is not primarily a faith tradition, at least not in the sense that I defined it earlier. I defined it in a very unbiblical way. I don't know if you guys caught that. Most of you guys that asked me questions, you let me get away with that. You took the bait. But yeah, that is a very unbiblical definition of faith. I wish I had time to go into that. I don't, but I'll just kind of leave that there. Christianity is a knowledge tradition. Yes, faith is talked about all over the Bible, but it's not that version of faith that I gave at the beginning. But it talks about knowledge a lot as well. Jesus did not castigate Thomas for asking for evidence. He actually gave him the evidence that he asked for. You read the book of Exodus, just to mention one book in the Bible, and read how many times the phrase or the words, I am doing this so that you may know that I am God, appears in that book alone. So this is not a faith tradition. Christianity is a knowledge tradition. It is built upon evidence. So I just want to encourage you with that. Okay, secondly, I wish I had time to go into a little bit of depth with the objections that I threw at you and kind of help you work through them. I don't have time for that today, so I'm not going to leave you hanging though. I'm going to reference you guys to some resources that will help you, okay? So you go to my website. It's danielcollaborative.com. danielcollaborative.com. Daniel as in the prophet. Collaborative as in collaborative. And there's going to be a pop-up on the lower right part of the screen. And if you click on that pop-up, it will send you to a couple of resources. The first pop-up, first resource is a list of YouTube videos and articles, not from me, but from other people, that basically goes through any sort of objection that I did throw at you today and that I could throw at you today. Okay, so everything that I threw at you is answered in that first resource list. The second resource list is a list of books. It's not an exhaustive list, but it'll get you started. So choose a book that interests you, get it from the library or buy it, and then read it, and then go down the list. The third list is a list of websites that you can consult whenever you are challenged with various things. So those three resources will equip you to a great degree if you take advantage of them, okay? In my time that I have left, we're gonna go to the Word, and then we're going to draw some lessons from the Word regarding what just happened. Sound good? Okay. If I had the time, I would actually go to these verses, but I don't have time, and I need to kind of, speed things up. So I'm just gonna, rattle off the verses off the top of my head, They are familiar verses. You guys should, these verses are well known. You should know them. And then we're going to bring some lessons on them. So the first verse is Matthew 22, 36 through 39. It's where Jesus is talking to a teacher of the law, and teacher of the law challenges him with, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And what does he say? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and, you guys finish it, mind. Very good. And love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, that's the first verse. Second verse is Romans 12, 2. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You guys are saying it like I'm beating a dead horse here. This is a familiar drum. You're like, mind. Okay. All right. Sounds like you guys know where I'm going with all this. Colossians 2:8. Do not be taken captive by hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on the traditions of men. And the last verse is 2 Timothy 2:3 through 7, where Paul encourages Timothy to think like a soldier, train like an athlete, and work like a farmer. Okay? So keep those verses in mind as I'm talking. So first, let me get a little bit from you guys, all right? How would you describe that conversation? So what was going on, even if you didn't say anything, what was going on in your heart as we were dialoguing, as short as it was? Just shout out some words.
Laughter, in kind of an ironic way on how a lot of us have very little insight to our own beliefs.
Okay? All right, so like a realization that maybe you're not as prepared as you think you are. All right, good. Just go ahead and just shout out some stuff, because I want to kind of get this.
I mean, it was kind of like there were things you wanted to say, but it was hard to understand how to put them into words.
Okay, so frustration and articulation. Good. One or two more. Just shout them out.
Faith should have been defined as the certainty of the attributes of God.
Okay, so you were a little frustrated with how I started. I was stacking the deck. Good, good. So grade yourselves. Even if you didn't say anything, even if you're just tracking the conversation in your head, give yourself a score on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 would be, I totally had my way with you. 10 would be, you guys totally owned and had your way. I mean, I hate to describe it in like those sorts of terms, but let's just do that for sake of conversation. So 1 would be, I had my way with you. 10 would be, you had your way with me. Just shout out some numbers. What would you give yourself, even if you didn't say anything?
2.
So 2, 1,
A 0.
0. Okay, so if this was school or a class and that was a test and you bring that grade home to your parents, what are they going to say?
You suck.
You're grounded. Okay, that's an F, right? That's an F. I didn't give you guys that grade. You guys gave yourselves that grade. So, what the question is, I don't want to beat up on, well, I do. I did kind of do this to beat up on you. More on that in a second. But I don't want to make you feel bad about yourselves. The question is, what are you going to do about this? Okay? What are you going to do about this? Maybe you're realizing now that you're not as prepared as you thought you were. That's pretty common. But the good news is that you've got time to do something about that. Okay? So a couple of things that I did that I think stymied you is, I used big sciencey concepts, big sciencey words. Newsflash, I don't even know what the Casimir effect is. I was just reading out on the blog about 5 minutes before, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a good term. I'll use it. I blinded you by science. I used big names. I referred to big concepts in the hopes that some of you would be like, man, I don't know quite what that means, but he sounds really smart, so I'm not going to say anything. I used kind of weasel words like we now know when we don't know, and science tells us when science doesn't tell us, and things like that. Just a minute, I projected supreme confidence. Did you guys pick up on that?
Yeah.
And that can be intimidating, right? It's kind of like the same thing as if you guys have read the worst case scenario handbook, which I'm sure all of you have, and you read about how to deflect a mountain lion attack, which I'm sure all of you have been in that situation before. When you're being attacked by a mountain lion, you're supposed to flare your jacket out to make yourself look bigger than you really are, and kind of shout and scream in the hopes the mountain lion says, man, I don't want nothing to do with that crazy bear. I'm out of here, And that's kind of what I was doing, right? That's what a lot of people do, right? It's tactics. It's rhetoric. I stacked the deck in my favor with my definition of faith. Okay, so you got to be aware of all these things. I think a lot of times they can intimidate us. They can have an emotional impact on us. And the key is to acknowledge the emotional impact they have on you. and then put that emotion to the side and say, all right, now let's deal straightforwardly with the content here. Let's deal straightforwardly with the argument. What exactly is being said? After all of the bluster, let's get down to brass tacks. What's the fundamental argument here? You got to get good at that. Okay, if I could give you one tip in talking with people, that would be it. But what I was doing here fundamentally is honestly, I was trying to beat up on you guys a little bit. In a good-natured way, but to show you, like I said, that maybe you're not as prepared for the next stage as you might assume. I wanted you to kind of feel that frustration that you mentioned. I really don't know how to articulate this. I don't know how to respond. I wanted you to be in that position because you guys are in high school, you're probably already experiencing some of that. When you get to college, it's going to be even more so. When you get to the work world, if you don't go to college, or if you go to the military, if you don't go to college, it's going to be like that. You're going to meet those objections. You're going to be in a secular environment where you're going to meet professors who are really smart, really nice, and they're going to throw challenges at you. Your dorm mates, same thing. Classmates, same thing. And you're going to be, you combine that with a very permissive moral atmosphere. You're on your own for the first time. And it's a very powerful combination for a lot of people. And if you're not prepared, it's really hard to withstand that. If you don't take your discipleship seriously and develop a Christian life of the mind now, when you get to that point, it's going to be tough for you. Okay, it's going to be tough for you. Let me read J.D. Vance's testimony. Has anybody seen the movie Hillbilly Elegy on Netflix? Okay, it just came out. It's a Ron Howard film, and it tells the story of J.D. Vance. It doesn't really go into his what I'm about to talk about right here, but he's a fascinating story. So, grew up in Kentucky or in kind of a lower class town in Ohio, and goes to the military, then he goes to college and ends up getting into Yale Law School and graduating from Yale, becoming a lawyer. So it's kind of like a success story like that. But he was raised in a religious milieu, and then when he got to college, he walked away for a period of time. He comes back eventually, but I'm going to read a section of this. It's going to take me some time, but it's just gold in terms of what you guys are about to experience when you get out into the world. Okay, this is what he says about his time in college. My abandonment of religion was more cultural than intellectual. The truth is that I discarded it for the simplest of reasons, the madness of crowds. Much of my new atheism came down to a desire for social acceptance among American elites. I spent so much of my time around a different type of people with a different set of priorities that I couldn't help but absorb some of their preferences. I became interested in secularism just as my attention turned to my separation from the Marines and my impending transition to college. I knew how the educated tended to feel about religion. At best, provincial and stupid, at worst, evil. Echoing Christopher Hitchens, I began to think and then eventually to say things like, the Christian cosmos is more like North Korea than America, and I know where I'd like to live. I was fitting into my new cast, in deed and emotion. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but the truth often reflects poorly on its subject. And if I can say something in my defense, it wasn't exactly conscious. I didn't think to myself, I am not going to be a Christian because Christians are rubes and I want to plant myself firmly in the meritocratic master class. Socialization operates in more subtle but more powerful ways. My son is 2, and he has in the last 6 months, just as his social intelligence has skyrocketed, transitioned from ripping our German shepherd's fur coat out to hugging and kissing him gleefully. Part of that comes from the joy of giving and receiving affections from man's best friend. But part of it comes from the fact that my wife and I grimace and complain when he tortures the dog, but coo and laugh when he loves on him. He responds to us as much as I responded to the educated caste to which I slowly gained exposure. In college, very few of my friends and even fewer of my professors had any sort of religious faith. Secularism may not have been a prerequisite to join the elites, but it sure made things easier. So that kind of tacit understanding that this is what we do here, this is how smart people think, and that's not you, Christian. You're going to feel that in college. You're going to feel that in the work world. And if you're unprepared, it's going to be very overwhelming for you. So the good thing is that a lot of people walk away, not because Christianity is weak, but because the word that I keep saying, they're unprepared. We stand on the shoulders of giants, intellectually speaking. We have a very deep bench. We have an embarrassment of riches of people who have convincingly answered everything that I can conceivably throw at you. The bad thing is that most people don't know about that. They don't care about it enough to avail themselves of those resources. Can you give me a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm bringing it home. And so I wanted to wake you up to that, hopefully to motivate you to take your discipleship more seriously and to take the concept of developing a Christian life of the mind more seriously. Okay? I use the word training. All right, this is not pizza and games, guys. This is training. This is serious stuff. This is what you need to do. And this is on you. All right? Don't, by all means, go to Mr. Nathan if you got questions. You know, that's his job. But it's not on him. It's on you guys. You guys are the ones that develop a Christian mind yourselves. Okay? Use those resources that I referred you to. All right? And this happens over time. So let me give you some tips. Okay? This is kind of the last couple minutes I got here. Just want to talk about a couple of practical tips that you guys can kind of keep in your head in terms of this quest. Number one, like I said, this doesn't happen quickly. This happens over time, over the long haul. A lot of people get motivated real quick, but then it's like a flash in the pan. That's kind of not how this works. All right, so you need to develop some habits and keep those habits going for the long term. Be a master of consistency. Okay, number two, I know the main thing that a lot of students say is, I don't have time. And look, I sympathize with you to a certain extent. You got AP classes, you got college apps, you got sports, you got jobs. But look, you do have time if you care enough about it. That's the way priorities work. If I don't exercise and my diet's horrible and I develop diabetes and I go to the doctor and he's like, if you don't start exercising, you got 10 years to live. I'm going to find a way to do the exercise. Okay? So same thing here. You guys do have the time, you just have to find it. To that end, one more tip. How do you find the time? Two things. Number one, redeem the time that you already have. Number two, get control of your screen time. Okay? Figure out in your day where you have time to sneak some stuff in. So maybe in your shower, you put on a podcast on the stereo. You guys do know what stereo is, right? I just used like a boomer term. So yeah, you put on a podcast when you're in the shower. If you drive to school, you put on a podcast in your car. Rather than watching Netflix before you go to bed, you read a book for 20 minutes. Find those little points in your day where you can fit that stuff in. Okay? Number two, get control of your screen time. You'd be amazed at how much time you have to devote to things that are priorities if you just do that one thing. And look, I teach high schoolers. I know you guys. You're addicted to your phones. Don't tell me you're not. Okay? I was watching the worship earlier and I saw people on their phones on worship. It's like, what are you doing? Okay? Find a way to lock that thing down. Get off social media. It is not good for you. It is toxic. And it's a time waster. Okay? You do that one thing, that frees up at least an hour, hour and a half a day. If not more. You don't need to binge on Netflix. Well, I mean, if it's Cobra Kai, yes. But other than that, that's the one exception. Okay? We all love Johnny Lawrence. Be like Johnny Lawrence. I'm kidding. Don't. You get my point, right? You don't need that stuff. You guys need to train. Because your test is coming. Your test is probably already here. All right, last thing. I know that I'm running over time here real quick. I don't want to make it sound like you guys have to go and like battle, argue people into the kingdom. That's not what I'm getting at here in terms of how to talk to people. Okay? I'm all about arguments. Use arguments. Challenge people. Ask good questions. All right? But just don't do it in like a combative way. You guys didn't do that here. You guys are really good. You were really friendly. A on that, on how you treated me as an atheist. But just don't get the wrong impression that you have to like be combative when you're talking to people. Okay? If you're going to ask them questions, if you're going to pose them challenges, great. But do it in a way that you would want them to do it to you if the shoe was on the other foot. Okay? So there's an element of grace along with the truth that you got to bring when you're talking to people about Jesus. Does that make sense? Okay, I just didn't want to leave you with the wrong impression. I'm over time. I got to go, guys.